Licensed counselors from Kansas City and Jackson County, Missouri, had their day in court challenging a troubling local ordinance that is essentially a ban on counseling that does not push children to reject biological reality. And we're seeing this across in different places of the country, different parts of the country. It's a little surprising it's in Missouri, but it's there. Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey, a frequent guest on the program, also joined the lawsuit as a co-plaintiff to protect the freedoms of other Missourians impacted by these ordinances. So what did the oral arguments look like in court today? Well, joining me now to share what happened is Hal Frampton, Senior Counsel at Alliance Defending Freedom and Director of their Center for Conscience Initiatives. He has been deeply involved throughout the proceedings of this case. Hal, welcome to Washington Watch. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tony. Great to be here.
Okay, let's jump right into this. How did the oral arguments go today?
They went well. They were very lengthy. The court was very engaged, asked very good questions of both sides, and we are hopeful that that right and truth will prevail and that the counselors' freedom to counsel people in accordance with their conscience will be upheld.
So this is basically the city putting in a gag rule saying that there's certain things you can't say. If someone comes to you with gender dysphoria, you can't counsel them that there's other options.
That's exactly right. It's censorship, pure and simple. It is the government putting its thumb on the scale and saying that in a private counseling conversation between a counselor and a willing client looking to find a way through their gender confusion, the counselor cannot say, well, there are actually ways that you can develop comfort with your natal sex. As we know, the overwhelming majority of children with these concerns will do if they're given the chance to. Government putting its thumb on the scale and saying, you can't say that.
But Hal, this is... it's absurd because we're talking about counseling. We're talking about having conversations. We're talking about just helping people go back to the source of possibly conflict, because we know from most cases there's some point of crisis, conflict that they could possibly work through. In most cases they do, but rather they would have them go down a path of taking hormones or surgeries that are irreversible.
Yes, and that's what's so disturbing about it is that we know that there are essentially two paths here. There's path one where a counselor helps a child through their confusion, has open and honest conversations with them, and the child develops comfort with their natal sex. That's one path. The second path, and the one that Kansas City is essentially forcing counselors to send kids down, is the path towards medicalized transition and dangerous drugs and surgeries that we know in the end do not actually make people happier and carry inordinate risks.
And most times irreversible.
Absolutely. Most of those interventions are indeed irreversible. They can lead to a person being a patient for life, becoming sterile, and having a lifetime of regret.
Okay, so how are people harmed by having conversations about things in the past that may have created this dissidence within them about their sexual identity?
Well, they're not, and that's one of the falsehoods that we have to deal with in these cases is the lie that if you just have a conversation about this will somehow harm the child or they'll do something to themselves or something. And the research simply doesn't bear that out. There's no evidence that having conversations is remotely harmful. And in fact, the emerging evidence is that it's helpful and that it helps children ultimately understand themselves better and understand who they are and who God made them to be.
You know, Hal, I know it's always hard to read the courts, but oftentimes based upon how the justices or the judges engage in the conversations and the questions they ask, you know, you try to predict which way they might be leaning. What kind of conversation took place? What were the questions that were being asked in the courtroom today?
There were a lot of probing questions, some about the issue that you and I just talked about, whether there really is evidence that these kinds of conversations harm anyone. And we pointed out that that evidence doesn't exist, and we've submitted a great deal of research on that point. So we never want to try and predict an outcome because you never know, but we were encouraged with the level of engagement and the fact that the court seemed to be working through all of these issues carefully.
You know how I mentioned this earlier. I would be nice to say that this is a one-off. That this what's happening there in Kansas City is unique, but it's not. We see this happening in jurisdictions across the country.
We do, and one of the things that we really take hope from is that the Supreme Court is going to deal with this very issue in the fall in another case that we are involved with, the Childs case out of Colorado, where the state of Colorado has a law very similar to Kansas City's ordinance there, and we're very encouraged that the Supreme Court granted cert, agreed to take that case, and we'll hear all of these arguments and hopefully hand down a decision affirming that, yes, indeed, counselors have a First Amendment right to have these conversations with struggling kids.
It's amazing. This is where we have come to, but this is really an extension of the cancel culture, just wanting to silence that which they cannot confront with truth and facts. So they just want to silence it, and this is such a just such a revealing example of that. And that's why we have to advocate for the truth, and why I'm so grateful for Alliance Defending Freedom, and that you're out there fighting for the freedom of speech and religion all across this nation, and literally around the world. So, Hal, thanks so much for taking time to join us today.
Thank you, Tony. I really appreciate it.